One more. Take your right hand and find your heartbeat. Give thanks for another day to be a better and better version of yourself. And take your left hand and cross it over the right. This is the mudra of self-trust. I'm listening to you, my heart. And send a little message of love and gratitude through your whole body. Thanks for being on the journey with me, body. Thank you for the messages that you send. I'm listening. And then relax your hands. Open your eyes. Let yourself smile, because that helps dissolve stress chemistry. Smiling really does. Erica, would you mind locking the door now? Yeah. Okay. So today we're gonna kind of tie things together. And one of the things I have said throughout this series is that yoga is a magnificent course of self-regulation. And there's so many reasons why. Today we're gonna add a little bit more as we kind of expand our understanding of polyvagal theory and relate that to yoga. Ooh, I wish I had 4 hours today. Okay. So we talked about polyvagal theory as in the ventral vagal, which is the front. It goes along the front of the spine. And when we're in ventral vagal, we're in our happy place. It's called the social engagement system, which means that we can engage with others in a good way. Okay? And so ventral vagal runs along the front. It comes from the front of the brain, more frontal than the back, than the dorsal. And it channels along the front. And then dorsal vagal comes from more the posterior, the back of the brain, and is more posteriorly oriented into the back. And that's the one that actually innervates all of our lower organs, for digestion and so forth. And so sympathetic nervous system, so when we jump out of the vagus nerve, or the vagus nerve goes, hey, go over here, activating sympathetic nervous system, then we're getting kind of amped up, right? That's when that stress bath occurs, that stress chemistry. And it's a dance. So the thing is that we also talked about hybrid states. And the thing is, a little bit of cortisol is not going to send you off the deep end, right? We need a little bit of cortisol, a little bit of stimulating chemistry to keep us going, right? If you have a small child and the baby's crying, if you don't get a little sympathetic activation, you're gonna sleep right through it, right? But it's like, oh, what's going on, right? Mom, Dad, come get me, And mom or dad get a little sympathetic activation so that they can get up and move, right? It's also healthy competition. It's also motivation to do stuff in your life, right? So nothing is inherently bad, right? It's that when we get too much too often, that's when we start getting into trouble. Same with dorsal, like that dorsal kind of sinking back is like, whoo, okay, like that can also be a good state, also like a deep state of calm and relaxation. And when dorsal and ventral are both activated, we're in that deep state of intimate connection. It's a dance, right? We're kind of dancing around these three states all day long. And if we don't have enough sympathetic activation, we become hopeless and helpless and depressed. When we have too much sympathetic activation, we become anxious, develop maybe panic disorder, and are just freaking out all the time. And the people in our lives maybe are like, "Ooh, maybe you need to like take a little break over there," you know. So in yoga, we learn about the 3 major nadis, or energy channels. And the 2 main channels that weave along the spine and merge at what's called the third eye center, or Ajna chakra, those are Ida and Pingala. And Ida is the right side channel. It's also called the solar channel. This is sympathetic activation. The solar channel is heating, activating, gives you drive. So Ida, solar channel, activating. Pingala, left channel, is also called the channel of the moon, Chandra. It is the soothing, cooling, softening channel, right? That's vagal channel is parasympathetic. So right channel is sympathetic activation, left channel is parasympathetic activation. And there's been studies that show that we alternate our nostrils in our breathing practices naturally throughout the day, because we're dancing that dance between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic activation. And I remember studying with a teacher many years ago, Swamini Mayatitananda, and she talked about, like, after you eat, you should have more air, more breathing, like your left channel might even completely shut down, because you need that heating, you need that activation to digest your food. You need like mobility and motility in your digestive system to process food. So one of the practices that we do in yoga and pranayama is alternate nostril breathing to bring balance between sympathetic, Ida, solar channel, and parasympathetic, Chandra, lunar channel. Right? It's brilliant. We've been doing it this whole time and we didn't even know. Sushumna is the channel in the middle. Sushumna is the main channel in the middle that follows the spinal cord. And Ida and Pingala weave their ways around that central channel. And when we're in that central channel, we are really in our ventral vagal. And the ventral vagal path is right along the very front of the spine. And so our goal is to be able to navigate, to be in our yoga zone as much as possible. In trauma work, they call it the resilience zone, or the zone of tolerance. And really, we want to kind of be able to dance through sympathetic, parasympathetic activation and keep landing back in our calm center, back in our sushumna. So cool. So it's important to understand that a little bit of cortisol, a little bit of that stress chemistry is good. It's what keeps you motivated in life. And that if you have none of that, then you're really not motivated. And so when we understand also that Ida, that right solar channel, and Pingala, that left lunar channel, that we're kind of navigating and shifting between those two channels throughout the day, we can be a little more accepting that sometimes we're a little more amped up and sometimes we're a little bit more like, whew, I need to take a break. And that the idea, one of my teachers in a recent training that I did, the integrative somatic trauma therapy training, was that she said the goal is not to be calm. Calm is not the goal. Phew. Calm is not the goal. The goal is to be connected. Connected to yourself, connected to the messages that your body is sending you. And to also bring a kind of sweet attention of understanding, like, yeah, I gotta get things done right now. So I'm booking it around. That's gonna activate some more cortisol. And so then maybe before I sit down to dinner with my family, I just lay down on the floor for a minute, breathe, sink into the back of my body, and kind of help to bring that dance from way over on the right side back more towards center. So because the vagus nerve travels along the spine, spinal movements help to stimulate different parts of that nerve and help us to navigate the constant shifting between parasympathetic, vagal tone, and sympathetic activation. Does that make sense? Right? So when we twist, we're kind of wringing out the spine and we're wringing out tension, because sympathetic activation activates tension in your muscles. It's mobilizing. We said last week that it's mobilization, right? A full sympathetic activation is mobilization with fear. Like, and haven't you felt that even when you're just like, your life isn't threatened, but you've got to get some things done. So there's a little bit of fear pumping you, pushing you through, right? And so to help calm that state, we do forward folds. And I was always taught, 20 some years ago when I was first diving deep into yoga. I mean, I've been practicing yoga for 34 years this year. But I was always taught, like, forward folds are grounding. Right? Forward folds are grounding. And now we can understand that it's because it kind of helps you curl in, which sends this message of safety into your nervous system. And it compresses a little bit that ventral vagal nerve. And so that little bit of compression helps it to activate, to return you back to your center. We learned that back bends are stimulating, right? Back bends are stimulating because they're compressing kind of the sympathetic nervous system path. And that can kind of give you a little bit of get up and go. So when you're feeling like too amped up and you need a break, child's pose. That's why everyone says, if you're freaking out, just go into child's pose, right? Because it's like soothing, and it's putting a little bit of compression, waking up that ventral vagal nerve. Does that make sense? Is this helpful at all? Yeah. So then if you're kind of depressed or hopeless, or you're like, I'm trying everything and nothing's working, I'm just gonna, right? And you want to go back into helplessness or hopelessness, or a deep state of that is apathy. Like, I don't care. I just don't even care. Maybe you do a couple of back bends. Get a little bit of stimulation into that sympathetic nervous system so that you can return to a state of caring, right? And the goal is not calm. The goal is to be connected to the messages of your body so that you can be more in that central channel as often as possible, but understanding that it's a moving target, so to speak. Does that make sense? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how a sympathetic activation can get us into pain, and how we get stuck in chronic pain. Because for a very long time, 30 years this year, I've been working as a massage therapist, trigger point therapist, and I kind of specialize in working with people who are in pain and stuck in pain patterns. And as I've said, one thing I notice is that there's emotional, an emotional piece always when there's someone in chronic pain, always. So an activation of the sympathetic chain, that like get up and go chain, cortisol, stress, maybe fear is involved, an activation of that means that your muscles are going to contract. The muscles of fighting and running are going to contract. And that's normal and necessary. And then you need to kind of get out of that activation. And if you don't get yourself out of that activation, over time, and that stacks, the cortisol and the stress chemistry stays really high in your body, then that can turn into chronic states of contraction in your muscles, chronic tension, and tension is by definition trigger points in my world. Trigger points are focal points of tension in your muscles, and they cause pain patterns that are the same from person to person to person. So you can come to see me and say, oh, I've got this radiating pain down my iliotibial band. I've got a deep ache in my butt. Everything is clenched. I'm like, oh, that's gluteus minimus. We can take care of that. But the first thing you have to do is breathe in your belly and reset your nervous system a little bit, or that no matter what amazing work I do on your gluteus minimus, it's going to come back if you don't address the nervous system piece. To truly release your physical trigger points, you have to address your emotional trigger points. You have to address the emotional trigger points. And the tension can become a protection around your system, right? Your nervous system kind of gets to running the show. And so we have to kind of woo our nervous system a little bit into submission. And we do that by creating a sense of safety in our own selves. So one of the most important practices that you can do is doing that crown chakra meditation, where you make a chrysalis of a safe cocoon around yourself, and then let your nervous system know, like, it's all right, baby. We're safe. I'm safe right here. It's okay, right? So when you're feeling really activated and amped up, and you want to like look at your family and go, y'all go ahead and eat. I'm putting myself in timeout. I used to say that to my daughter, because little kids don't care. They'll just smack you right across the face when they're toddlers. If you take away the kitchen knife, and they're running around with the kitchen, it's like, ooh, hey, here's another toy. Here, take this plastic thing, and I'll take the knife. And one time my daughter just smacked me right across the face. And then 2 minutes later, she was fine. And I was mad. I was so still mad. I'm like, oh, you came out of my body and you smacked me across the face because I'm trying to protect you from a knife. I can't even process that, And so I said, I'm going to go into timeout and get myself regulated, because I want to hit you back, right? When you have a small child, you suddenly understand why people can sometimes hit their kids. I'm not saying it's okay to abuse your children, but you start to get it. You're like, oh, okay. Good thing I have control over my nervous system, and I'm going to put myself in timeout. The moms in here are going, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, right? And so there's no shame around it. It's just that we can become so activated. So it becomes our job really to regularly check in, connect, practice some of the tools to get ourselves out of that activation, so that we're not having to keep ourselves, in check all the time. And then if we don't do practices to actually process that cortisol and process that stress chemistry, it gets lodged in our muscles as tension, and then it can lead to chronic pain, or chronic recurring pain that comes back over and over and over again. And the cool thing is that now that we understand, we don't have to tell the story. We don't have to go back to when we were 3 and we were abused. We can just go, oh, this is my body protecting me. Thank you, body, for wanting to protect me. Thank you, nervous system, for wanting to protect me. I see you. I hear you. I'm going to go into my little cocoon, and I'm going to reset. I'm going to let you know that we're safe now. And I don't know if I shared this story, but I had a client come in who had been in a domestic violence situation, and I just saw her a couple months ago. And she came in and started just screaming and crying, literally I was like, so what can I do for you? She's like, ah! And she started screaming and crying, and she had been in a domestic violence situation where she had been choked. And she's like, my chest is all full of trigger points, my neck is full of trigger points. I was like, hell yeah, I get it. And how long ago did this happen? 5 years. She's been living in the fear of that for 5 years. And so when she came in to see me, literally the first hour I just held her and breathed with her. That's all I could do, because I can't start trying to push out her trigger points. I can't push past that protection. And so when we get into a state where we chronically don't feel safe, our muscles will tense, and that's called guarding, right? You've heard that term before, right? Oh, that person's really guarded. They look like this. And so to honor those messages and to use the tools when you recognize when you're either in sympathetic activation, when there's too much go, 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 or too much fight, or too much protection, taking some time, regulating yourself. And then, or when you're like helpless and hopeless and down in the tunnel, you got to get yourself motivated somehow, some little piece, move your body, even if it's just a little bit. Even if it's just like, okay, I'm just going to wiggle my fingers. Something to get some movement, and then start making the movement bigger and bigger and bigger to get a little bit more oomph in your nervous system. And the thing is, if we become enslaved by our stress response, if we don't learn how to control our nervous systems, someone else is going to control our nervous system. And that could be someone from your past, it could be someone right now, or it could be someone in your future. It's how we become susceptible to being manipulated, because we can't control our own responses. So it's really important to practice self-regulation, to get that understanding, to move back into your ventral vagal. And it's also good to understand, I really wish someone had taught me this piece, this next piece, a long time ago, is that if you're in a situation, a job or a relationship where you're having to self-regulate all the time, now I'm not talking about having little children, because you got to figure that out, right? But if you're in a relationship or a situation where you're having to self-regulate all the time, where when the other person comes in, if they kind of come in with a lot of drama or a lot of chaos or a lot of confusion, and you feel confused, that's a signal that that relationship is not healthy for you. You can get like grade A, superstar, able to regulate, but if you're having to do it all the time, that's a message that maybe you need to step a little bit further back and look at that, right? And maybe you can change it. Maybe you can change the job. Maybe you can change the relationship. So we're in this dance. We're in this dance, and we have to gain the trust of our nervous system. And so when we get really highly activated, moving a little bit more big and full and quick to kind of process that energy and that stress chemistry, and then we can slow it down. Then we're going to slow it down. So what we're going to do is our same kind of yoga physical practice today. And I want to tell you again that it was really mindful for me to create a practice where we're starting side to side, and we're going in and out of the practices side to side, so that there's a familiarity with the poses, but there's also, you have to kind of think about things a little bit. We do things a little bit differently, enter in and out of the poses differently, do kind of weird things in the middle of the pose, because that keeps your brain in the present moment. Have you ever gone through your yoga practice and then you're like, did I just do it? Did I even do yoga? I don't even remember, because it becomes so habitual, right? And so part of this whole thing is getting out of the habits, getting out of the habits. Is that all sinking in, helping to tie it all together? Great. Oh, it's so good, right? It's so juicy. God, geez, so hopeful. It's so hopeful. So just sit up well for a moment. Take whichever mudra. If you want to do Dvimukha mudra. If you want to do Adhi mudra. And the last piece that I want to share before we get started with our physical practice is that it becomes, to be able to take a step back and look at things, you have to really stand guard at the gates of your brain, of your thoughts. You have to stand guard at the gates of your thoughts, because if you're stuck, like that woman who'd been choked, she was stuck in that experience. And there's that part of our brain that doesn't know the difference between something we're remembering and seeing on the screen of our mind, or something that's happening right now. She was enslaved to that memory, and I get it. It's a big one. It's hard. But so if we're stuck in our old stories, you can't drive into your future looking in the rearview mirror, right? You're going to crash. And so what are your thoughts? What are the thoughts that you regularly think throughout the day? Do you keep going back to an old story of how you were betrayed? An old story of grief and suffering? And those kinds of thoughts that show up in a sympathetic activation are revenge, retaliation, ruminating about it over and over again, getting angry, seeing the person maybe who harmed you be harmed, anger, hatred, loathing. We all do it. There's no shame. There's no shame. Just notice. Or if there's a story of, I suck, I'm stupid, I'm worthless. Noticing what your thoughts are. This is a practice to ongoing. What are your thoughts? And when you see that a thought happening over and over and over again, you know, okay, that's one I need to weed out of my mental garden. And if it's a thought of anger, maybe you could, you turn it around, you flip it, and you make it an I am statement of the opposite. So if you're angry, hating, wanting to retaliate against someone who harmed you, maybe you're the pratipaksha bhavana, or the opposite is, I am peaceful. I forgive. Or maybe if your thoughts tend to be self-deprecating or self-shaming, I'm worthless, I'm no good, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do this. Then maybe your opposite in your I am statement is, I am smart. I am capable. Or if you're running around mad at everybody, maybe it's I am peaceful. So I want you to just cultivate an I am statement. And you can go do it throughout the practice today, because we're going to bring that into our Yoga Nidra at the end of class today. So I am. And it might just be, if you're not sure, I am peaceful. I am grateful. I am whole. Maybe it's I am worthy. Because if you're trading your real safety for a sense of safety just because somebody is telling you they love you or they care about you, but their actions don't match that. Maybe you're trading a sense of safety for real safety. And so maybe that message is, I am worthy of real love. I am worthy. I am whole. I am safe. Let's take a couple more breaths here. I am. And then begin to open your eyes and start to make your way up to standing. Just nice and slowly, or jump up and get on it if you're stressed out.